All right, thanks everybody for joining us here tonight, this afternoon. We are the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance, and you are here for our Get Legit Education series. Tonight's session is Nevada County Cultivation Permits 101. I want to start by just introducing myself and the Alliance for us tonight. My name is Maggie Phillipsborn. I am the Director of Membership and Education here at the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance. I just want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. It's our hope that anybody who is interested in commercial cannabis here in Nevada County will take the time to tune in to these webinars to educate yourselves and to continue to be or become stewards of the environment and our community here in Nevada County. This Get Legit Education series provides the preparation necessary to assist in securing a local cultivation permit and a state cultivation license. The series includes webinars, support groups, business skills trainings, and a mentor program. All of our Get Legit webinars are online, virtual through Zoom. They're free of charge and open to the public. Each of our webinars, including this evening's, is recorded, and all of the recordings are available to watch online through the Alliance website. The Get Legit Education series is a wonderfully collaborative effort with Nevada County Media, Nevada County Community Development Agency, the Nevada County Cannabis Compliance Division, the California Department of Cannabis Control, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, and the Division of Water Rights. I also want to take a moment to thank some of our allied industry business sponsors here at the Alliance for helping us to bring this webinar series free and to the public continually over the years. I'd like to give a shout out to Ag Natural, Gregerson Greenhouse, Vital Garden Supply, Hometown Hydroponics, Foresters Co-op, Moreland Consulting, Humboldt Seed Company, Grow Generation, Rolling Hills Bookkeeping, and SC Labs. Thank you to those businesses for their continued support. I also want to just introduce who we are here at the Cannabis Alliance. The Alliance we are a nonprofit trade association representing the local cannabis community. Our mission is to support public policy initiatives through representative advocacy, to provide educational opportunities, and to create space for connection within the industry and throughout the greater community here. Some of the services that we provide to our members, one, which is a very huge one, is a consistent voice and representation locally and also at the Capitol through our statewide partner, Origins Council. And we offer year-round education. We have monthly industry affairs calls that cover topics from regenerative farming practices to compliance education to business development skills. We have some of our upcoming industry affairs calls. There's one next month on cannabis equity and equity businesses and building bridges and through the equity programs throughout the state. We have a industry affairs called on cannabis employment and labor. We have a brand new farm labor contract business here in Nevada County, which is extremely exciting. And we'll go over farm labor, employment, and employing compliance in that call. Last month, we had industry affair calls that covered marketplace and what's going on in the market with a cannabis data analyst firm. Yesterday, we had members participate in a presentation on the new OCAL program, which is a California Organic Equivalence program, which is just launching and is also extremely exciting for the cannabis industry. Members have the ability to attend and listen to past recordings of our industry affair calls. We have a buddy program that links up new farmers to already permitted licensed farmers. We use Slack and have a robust online resource hub for policy updates and news articles. We offer monthly farmer-to-farmer meetups for members to connect and share resources with one another, as well as seasonal supply chain industry mixers. So there's a lot going on. There's wonderful opportunities to get plugged in. And just so folks know, the next upcoming Get Legit webinar after this one is with the Department of Cannabis Control, which is on state cannabis cultivation licenses. That's on Thursday, October 14th. This is the newly consolidated Department of Cannabis Control, which is the state regulatory agency. So this will be our first webinar with them as the DCC, which is really exciting. And so definitely register for that and tune in to hear what is going on the state application end. I also wanted to point out that we offer permitting support groups the following Mondays after each one of these Get Legit webinars. There will be one this coming Monday, October 4th. These are really exceptional opportunities for folks to get their questions answered and to continue moving forward with their permit applications. County staff go above and beyond to make themselves available during these support groups. They are open to the public. Please email us. I will put my email address in the chat feature if you are interested in attending any of these support groups. They are the following Monday after each of our Get Legit webinars. I want to just give a few points on the format for tonight's webinar. There is both a chat function and a Q&A function. Please type in your questions as they come to you throughout the presentations. We will make sure to get to all of the questions. And these webinars are as functional as you make them, so please participate and speak up. If you have questions, now is a wonderful opportunity tonight to ask them. So don't hesitate. No question is too mundane or silly or anything of that nature. I will put our contact information in the chat feature, but please stay connected to us here at the Alliance through social media, our website, which is nccannabisalliance.org. We are on Instagram and Facebook, and you can email us and reach out to us anytime. We are here to support. And I also before we get started, want to take a moment to introduce the Alliance's Executive Director, Diana Gamzon. If you could just wave for us here on the screen, or if you want to say hi real quick. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. And with that, we have a wonderfully full lineup of county staff members here with us tonight to present. And I want to hand it over to Jeff Merriman, who is the head of the Cannabis Compliance Division, and let you guys start the evening off. And just thank you so much for taking the time with all of us tonight, and we look forward to seeing what you have to say.
Thanks, Peggy. I'm going to share my screen real quick. All right, well, good evening. My name is Jeff Merriman. I manage the Cannabis Compliance Division for Nevada County. The purpose of this workshop is really kind of a permitting 101. So, you know, if you're new to our ordinance or you're looking to get permitted, maybe you're, you know, currently cultivating unpermitted and you're interested in what it would take to become a legal cultivator, that's really the purpose of this, is to go over the basics. We get into some a little bit more of the details, but it's really, you know, what is the basics of our ordinance, what is required for an application, what goes on during the review process, you know, kind of in everything you need to know to get started. That being said, like Maggie mentioned, if you have questions throughout the presentation, just put them in the chat. We'll try to answer those as we go. That way there's, you know, a ton of time for Q&A at the end as well in case something else comes up. So as Maggie mentioned as well, you have a lot of county staff here. So you have pretty much a representative from every department. You also have Nevada County Consolidated. You have Penn Valley Fire. So use this as an opportunity to really ask whatever questions you have, because it's kind of rare that you have everybody involved in one place, you know, ready to answer questions. So with that, the agenda, you know, this evening we'll be going over some ordinance and parcel basics, getting a little more in depth on the difference between ADPs and CCPs. We'll discuss canopy layouts, support areas, go into a little bit of detail on ag exempt greenhouses, touch on some of the other specific application requirements, and we'll end it with tips and tricks on how to get permitted. So starting off, we currently allow cultivation on ag, AE, and FR zone parcels. As you can see here, your acreage really determines the type of cultivation you can do and the amount of cultivation you can do. So 2 to 4.99 acres is indoor only, 500 square feet. You can see 5 to 9.99 goes up to 2,500, and you can do indoor, mixed light, or outdoor. 10 to 19.99 is 5,000 square feet of mature canopy, same type of indoor, mixed light, or outdoor. And then our maximum allowed amount is 20 acres or over, which are allowed 10,000 square feet of mature canopy. So our ordinance does require 100-foot setbacks from property lines from canopy and support areas. I would highly suggest ensuring that you're able to meet these setbacks. If you can't meet these setbacks, there are some options for you. There is a variance option. There's also, if you're able to get an easement from your neighbor, it's possible to still meet these 100-foot setback requirements. But these processes do take time. These go through the planning department. These are not kind of a 1-week turnover type of thing. So if you can meet those 100-foot setbacks, that's ideal. If you can't, there's still some options for you to try to make it. So we also require a 1,000-foot setback from sensitive sites. This would be like a state or federal park or a church. There also are some options if you can't meet that for a state or federal park. So if the site is 300 feet or greater to the property line from the park, and that portion of the park is unimproved, inaccessible by the public, you can basically submit evidence for that in your application, and the planning director will determine whether that variance applies, and you can then go forward with your permit. If you own 2 parcels that are different sizes and your residence is on the smaller parcel, you can use the acreage of the larger parcel to determine the amount of mature canopy that you can cultivate. So to make that a little less confusing, let's say the parcel on the left-hand side in the photo there is 5 acres and the parcel on the right-hand side is 20 acres. Both of those parcels are common ownership. You can see all the bullet points here. There's direct access. You're allowed to use that 20-acre parcel for your 10,000 square foot canopy, even though there's no residents on that parcel. That will limit that parcel in the future from being its own separate, permit. You're kind of tying those 2 parcels together, but this is an allowance that we allow just to make it easier for you to get that maximum canopy. We also allow offsite processing. The main thing with this is just be sure that if you plan on doing this, put this in your application. The location will need to be commercially permitted and have an applicable state license. With that, I'll hand it over to Lucas from the planning department.
Hey, my name is Luke. I'm associate planner here in Nevada County. And so we have 2 types of permits that you can apply for. The first I'll talk about is administrative development permits. So essentially that is for canopies that are 2,501 to 10,000 square feet. They will be submitted to the planning department for an administrative review process, meaning that there's no public hearing required. It's all done in-house. And it's a 30-day review for each time that you submit, and then we'll give you a response. Either your application looks complete or we have more questions. The initial deposit to submit an application for this type of project is $2,022.52. And then you'll have to have an annual permit that you apply for every year, and that comes with inspections for your crop, and that is $919.26. So the general process, as I was saying, is we need a complete submittal, meaning that all items on the checklist were included with the initial submittal. It will be routed to relevant departments and agencies for an administrative project that is generally within Nevada County. So the other departments that are with us here tonight. And then we're going to be doing a review. It does allow for 30 to 45 days. We try to get a review within 30 days for any project that's submitted to us. And at the end of that, you'll be told that it's either a complete project and you're getting conditional approval, or there's more items that we need to be able to tell exactly how you're proposing your operation. The other type of permit that we have is a commercial cannabis permit. Those are for canopies 2,500 square feet and less. Those are led by the Cannabis Compliance Division, will be submitted to them. It's likewise also an administrative review process, and they're a little bit cheaper. They're $1,638.90, and the annual cannabis permit still applies. So similarly, we'll be doing a complete submittal received, meaning you met all the items on the checklist. They'll be routed out just like an ADP would be, and the review is only 14 days. If you've met all the requirements, you'll also get a conditional approval, and then you can move on to the annual inspection phase. You can track your projects by going onto this online portal for citizen access, where you can see if each department marked you as complete or incomplete, meaning that they needed additional information. But the best way to figure it out if you're having any issues is just reach out to those departments individually. We can tell you exactly what we need and how to apply it to us. So the things that we're looking for an ADP and CCP submittal, a professionally completed site plan and clear documents, specifically having the supporting documents and the site plan match up, so we get a real clear picture of exactly what you're proposing. We're looking for all improvements on site, existing and future improvements, contiguous canopy areas, all setbacks delineated on the site plan so we can see that you're not encroaching on any of those. All of your support areas clearly defined and exactly what will be taking place in those areas. Scope of work, contacts for the project, the vicinity map so we know where in the county it's taking place, as well as the impervious surface area to make sure that you're not exceeding the impervious surface area for your zoning. Access from roadways and driveway information, and then also the section, township, and range that goes back to the vicinity map so that we know exactly where you're located. On-site water storage is often required with fire department connections, especially if you are including commercial buildings in your operation. Hazardous material storage areas as well with secondary containment, septic well, leach repair areas, utility locations, site slope and topography, and then if you're within 2 times the setback distance, so 200 feet, you will be required to have a boundary line verification supplied by a licensed surveyor so we can ensure that you're exactly where you say you are on your site plan. So some of the tips that we would recommend is hire experienced licensed professionals who know how to get through the process and are very familiar with our ordinances. Include multiple site plan sheets if necessary so that you don't have too much information on one page and it's hard to decipher what you're trying to tell us. Show all improvements and operations on your site plan, including future improvements. We want to see what your eventual build out will be so we can analyze all impacts related with the operation. And then quality site plans are the best chance for a complete submittal. Really just being able to show us exactly what you want to do is the best way to get where you want to be. This is an existing or example of a site plan. So it's just a general layout. This one's a little bit probably sophomoric for what we're looking for, but this is a better version here. You can see that they have all structures on site. They have access with all of the required fire safe turnouts and hammerheads and turnarounds, and everything is clearly delineated on this site plan. It's very easy to tell exactly what they're doing. And on the right-hand side, they've even totaled all of their canopy and support areas for us. So it's a real easy, quick glance to see what they want. And then you'll also be including a security operations plan, which is more of a narrative explaining exactly what you want to do that goes along with your site plan. You'll be showing all your required security measures and floor plans for all structures on that. You want to have the locations of all and security of hazardous materials on the site plan for environmental health to review. You're also going to need to have information for security lighting, showing where it's located and what type you'll be using, gates and fencing and access control measures so that we know how you're getting in and out and ensuring that you're meeting minimum fence requirements, on-site presence, saying who will be living there since that is a requirement of the ordinance, and securing valuables and related to business, the product as well as the money, including building security. And then the operations plan will talk about employees, hours of operations, vehicle trips, equipment, basically laying out everything that you're including in your project so we can ensure that you're doing it in a way that is in conformance with our zoning ordinances. Lighting is a large portion of most projects since you're not allowed to cause light trespass or any light pollution from your project. So we'll want to know that you have exterior lighting, and if you do have exterior lighting, it's not mounted higher than 15 feet, it's shielded, you're not using floodlights or high pressure sodium. And if you're using interior lighting, we want to know that you're using blackout tarps or some other mechanism to make sure that you don't have glowing hoops or greenhouses at night. So additionally, the cannabis cannot be visible from public right-of-ways or publicly traveled private roads. So you need to give us a brief description of how you're accomplishing that, whether it's through screening, vegetative screening, topography, accomplishes that for you. Just in your narrative, explain how you're doing that. And if you're including any noise producing equipment, please give us the spec sheets for that equipment. And if you have 3 to 4 items, you may be able to do the calcs yourself to give us the decibel levels at property lines. Otherwise, you're going to need to hire a licensed professional, which would be an acoustical engineer, to do a sound analysis so that we can ensure that you're not exceeding the allowable limits at property lines. Some of the other items that we will require are a copy of certificate of deposit or bond for $5,000. A transition plan is still allowed. That's essentially going to be a 2-year plan to bring any items that are out of compliance on the property, such as unpermitted barns, unpermitted grading. If you have some culverts on your property that maybe you never obtained permits for, we'll give you 2 years to get that completed and bring them into compliance. We'll also need dust control information, weighting device registration for all of your scales, and then submit your documentation to your local fire district for review and approval as well. And with that, I will be handing off to Thomas from Cannabis Compliance. Oh, sorry, there's one more. For the some of the other highlights are the Ag Department's pesticide use and pest management plan, biological resources information. So that's going to be cataloging any biologically sensitive sources on your site, such as waterways or protected groves of oak trees. Again, disclosing any hazardous waste that you may be using, including hazardous materials like stockpiling of gasoline and liquid propane. And then a cultural resource sensitivity letter to make sure that you won't be disturbing any cultural resources on your site when you begin to install the improvements for your project. If you have a LLC that you're utilizing, make sure to include the legal documents showing who's the members so that we know who's involved with the operation. And then your light and operation control plan, like we mentioned earlier. And if you are disturbing any resources, you'll have a biologist do a habitat management plan so that we can mitigate for any disturbance. To say, like, if you were grading within 100 feet of a perennial waterway or something like that, that's the type of environmental damage that we would want to have assessed by a professional. So you would turn in a report for us, and if we agree with it, then we'll let you operate under the recommendations of that biologist. You'll also be doing a water resources protection plan to ensure that you're not polluting any waterways, 3-acre conversion permits if you're removing any commercial timber species, and that would be through CAL FIRE. And all of this would be routed to other agencies for comment and review to ensure that we're doing our best job to make sure that Nevada County's environment is protected. So now I will hand off to Thomas.
Thank you, Lucas. My name is Thomas Miley. I'm with Nevada County Cannabis Compliance. I'm one of the officers that will be completing your annual ACP inspections. Also, we have Jason Besaw, Ricky Martinez, and instrumental to getting your ACPs issued, and it's Jessica Rist. So with your ACP, that will be automatically applied for the first time you submit with us. It does have an annual fee, and we will be issuing this annually from the date that it was issued. So your first year, when you get your conditional approval from planning, when your site is prepared, all your conditions of approval are met, you'll contact our department, Jessica Rist specifically, to get your ACP issued. So the pre-cultivation inspection is to be completed within 90 days of your ACP issuance. So make sure you time that out, what would work best for you. Keep in mind your conditional approval letter to the 90-day extension. You don't want to run too close to that, so it gives us time to make minor corrections if needed. We want to try to do this prior to any first-time cultivation planting, and then after your annual, we'll just continue to see you before the expiration. You schedule that with us, the Cannabis Compliance Division. We have 3 staff members who can do these inspections for you. And what we'll be looking at is your approved plans, your approved site plan, and your approved conditional approval letter from planning. When we come into these inspections, you should know exactly what we're looking for. We even have a checklist that we can provide that all we're looking to show, for you to show us, is what you said you're going to do and your conditional approval. So there really shouldn't be any surprises, and they all go rather well. The applicant will be on site with the inspector. Often it's a consultant. We typically try to show up with our fire agency representatives because their signatures are required to be signed on the ACP prior to cannabis compliance. So think about your ACP inspection with cannabis compliance. We're kind of the backstop for all other agencies and divisions to ensure that their conditions of approval have been met. We tend to be the only ones you see on site besides the fire professionals. And if you do have any issues, we use that as a inform and educate. We do have a correction notice. Something minor, we'll say, hey, we'll see you out in 3 days, have this corrected. Often it's something that's corrected promptly and we swing by and we're able to get that signature. So then we have the cultivation inspections. These can be conducted at random. Oftentimes we're in the field, and it's great when an applicant gives us a heads up of, when they're out a couple weeks before they harvest, gives us the opportunity to come on site. Or if we're in the area, we do have the opportunity to let you know in advance that we will show up. Non-compliance, with having staff on site, that can result in the revocation of ACP. Hasn't happened to date. Everybody has been open to having us out, and often it's a good time. We've had a lot of conversations over the application timeline. We get to meet people and see what your skill set entails. Again, these minor items that may be needing correction, we'll work with you for a solution to those. And annual inspections may be completed out the year if deemed necessary by enforcing officer. So if there's something we haven't heard from you, or something that you didn't check back in with us, we'll use that opportunity to reach out. So canopy areas, the contiguous areas, clearly defined and easily measurable. So this is going to be your flowering cannabis area. So if you use this diagram or this image down here, these beds are those stakes, those bamboo posts that we can clearly calculate square footage easily in the field. And all we're looking for is those beds to be laid out the same way as your site plan. This could include interior shelves, walls, etc. Non-continuous canopy areas and support areas. In the earlier slide, this is just a rough example. You may have an indoor mixed light area, you have an outdoor area and support area. So we do allow that to be spaced and offering its opportunity. If we get your mixed light area, as in this example, somewhere where there's no oaks located, that's a benefit for your project, benefit for planning, and a quicker project. So these are examples of canopy areas inside mixed light hoop houses. We're pretty open to what your proposal will be. If you have any ideas that aren't typical, reach out to us. We'll find a solution or something agreeable. But the main thing I want to identify inside the structure is, if you take a look at those 3-foot walkways, what we're looking for is ingress egress. We want everybody to be safe and get in and out. And they typically aren't a problem because you will need room to work within those hoop houses or greenhouses. Outdoors, the same thing, clearly defined. We know everything doesn't fall on the grid. We're open to different formats. Again, reach out for us to find a solution. Now, this is something that we opened up to 2 years ago, I believe. It at first did prove difficult, but now we seem to have it fine-tuned. So this is an individual pot. These are often 300 or 500-gallon pots. The difficult part of those pots is they're scattered throughout the site. So on your canopy area layout plan sheet, we require those to be identified and numbered so we could easily go through and do the calculations. And be sure that when you're running these, often the 500 or 300-gallon pots, those are circular. There's often trellising for those pots. What works best is T-posts to support those trellising, and that trellising in this instance can be that 7x7 square. Makes it very clear, and we get to count. And at the initial inspection, it may be difficult, but your cultivation it's a quick way of doing measurement calculations. Now, unacceptable layouts. We'll never see these with you in the field because we'll use any opportunity at your submittals or questions and comments, to correct these issues. A lot of beds, no walkways, hard to measure, hard to calculate. And then this lower one is just, kind of a amoeba, floating in the middle. There's no clear way how to measure that. So support areas. So you're allowed 90% of your canopy area to be your support area. So this is, where we see drying, curing, grading, trimming, storage, packaging. These are anything that you're doing that is not cannabis related. So, if you do run into an issue where you are over the 90%, we'll find a solution, identify, what needs to be removed from what you're intending to do. However, it's very rare that we see 90% of, that being 9,000 square foot support area use. This is one of the things we look for if you're proposing support area inside of a structure. So just clearly define floor area, what kind of activity are you doing in that? Your professionals typically are familiar with how to lay these out. So ag exempt greenhouses. We've had some recent changes to our ag exempt policy. So what we want to keep in mind is this is going to be a place where people are cultivating cannabis, and then we do now allow the drying of cannabis. What we don't want is, bodies in there full-time doing an activity for production purposes. So as long as we know you stick to the cultivation and the drying, those uses of employees can be allowed within there. These are simple construction methods, steel frames, PVC pipe, things like that. Typical what you see in the field. If you're putting in concrete posts or you're making anything permanent, that's where we're going to run into issues. These are supposed to be easily to move, transient in nature. If you need to move them, roll up the sides, etc. So typically we don't have any issues there. So with ag exempt greenhouse, to keep them agriculturally exempt and not full-fledged greenhouses, no plumbing, electrical, mechanical utilities installed. Now we do have some allowances for some low voltage and the new updated policy for electrical for the ag exemptions, but none of those fixtures are attached to the structure itself. Fans, lighting, panels, that's not a part of ag exempt structure. So just keep that in mind. If you want to propose something, we've seen it all now. We can work, we can tell you what's allowed and what isn't. So again, back to high and low tone greenhouses. These are easily movable, just the agricultural hoop houses that you're used to seeing around our county. There's something that can be taken down during the winter, so you don't damage your mylar and put back up. So if you keep that in mind, that will qualify for an agricultural exemption. So greenhouses, 3 acres or greater, 3,600 square feet maximum per acre, 35 feet maximum in width, 1 story. We've never seen a multi-story greenhouse or hoop house, excuse me, that lowers the use of what's underneath, and it's not allowed. So never has anybody not had enough of their agricultural exempt structures. It's just we'll always allow you the ability to have the canopy area coverage. And if you do propose multiple, make sure they're 5 feet apart. Okay, so key points. The minor electrical that I touched on earlier. You need a building permit to get those pedestal drops in. That's the maximum of 1 20 amp 4-gain receptacle at each end of the structure. We don't want any extension cords used, daisy chaining, anything that is potentially hazardous. or modified. These are for factory installed plugs of an item just to go in, just like a typical fan, plug, etc. And again, mounting of any permanent exhaust fans does not meet the requirement of an agricultural exemption. So keep in mind, whatever you're proposing, these pedestal drops, veg lighting, anything like that, just think of that cap coming off and everything remaining in the field, and we won't have any issues. Here's an example of the 4 gains. So you could have this on each side of the hoop house. This is elevation looking down. So the pedestal drops are on each end, and the appliances are located throughout the walkway next to the canopy area. And if you do have questions on this, feel free to contact Cannabis Compliance and we can work out a solution. So additional regulations to keep in mind, septics and wells, fire standards, access, grading. Grading tends to slow projects down a lot. So just try to design your project around minimizing the need for extensive grading. Lot line adjustments and easements, they will slow down a project, not because of the county review process often, but if you have a mortgage, you have lenders, signatures, recorded documents, they'll slow this process down. Anything you need that needs a building permit, we'll let you know in your review. Planning and cannabis, we're really good at identifying and telling you what you need for what aspect of your project, so there shouldn't be anything you're missing. You may need an encroachment not only with our public works department, you may need it with the state. We have had a few of those come up. Keep in mind additional permitting with the water board and fish and wildlife. You will be able to file with both of those before you submit an application with us. So go ahead and do so. So the next slide, I'm going to hand you off to Holly Clark. She's with Environmental Health.
Hi, everyone. I'm Allie, and I'm the technician with Environmental Health. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about wells and septic. For wells, cannabis operations with wells, you really don't, Environmental Health doesn't have any requirements for your cannabis operation regarding well yield. We do, however, for residential or getting your final for your residents, we do require 3 gallons a minute for a well yield. If that can't be produced, we will allow 1 gallon a minute with a holding tank. And that goes for every residence that you have on the parcel. So if you're going to have a residence and then say an ADU, then you will need 3 gallons a minute for the residence and the ADU, or 1 gallon a minute for each with a holding tank. And then if you want to go to the next slide, we will talk about portable toilets. For portable toilets, we've gotten really flexible with this. We were in the original asking for everybody that had more than 2 employees to install a separate septic system. We now allow for 2 to 6 employees to have a portable toilet annually, and that requires a annual permit through Environmental Health and an annual contract with a county approved portable toilet company. I want to touch base with what employees are to Environmental Health. That includes temporary, full-time, seasonal, and it's just anybody that is working for that operation that doesn't live on the residence legally. If you're going to have more than 6 employees, you do require we require a separate septic system for the commercial operation, but we do allow 4 years after your approval date to get that in compliance, so to get that septic final. You do need a portable toilet with an annual permit during those 4 years. And if you have any questions about installing a septic system, please feel free just to contact Environmental Health. With that, I will go back to Lucas in planning.
Hello again. So I'm going to talk about legal access. If you are not on a public road and take direct access off of that publicly maintained road, you will be required to show how you obtain legal access, meaning that you have legally deeded access across private roads. So you would do that through a deed or a title or recorded map, record of survey, whatever information that you have that can show that you have that legal access out to the closest public road. Please provide it with your application so we can ensure that you're legally accessing your property for your commercial operation. So any existing roads need to actually be built within the easement, the right-of-way that is prescribed for them. So this is a kind of a common thing when roads were built maybe a long time ago or were not built with the best supervisors or anything like that. Sometimes they're built outside the easement, which means that when you are driving on those roads, you're actually trespassing on someone's private property. So you would want to also make sure that the roads that you're driving on were constructed within the right-of-way that they were intended to use. So you'll show that actual road improvements itself and the easement on your site plans. So improvements required encroachments, which is a connection between a private driveway and a road or a public road. So you would basically need to have an encroachment permit to build that roadway that attaches to a public road, and that would be obtained through the Department of Public Works. Likewise, if you were putting an improvement like a culvert or something into a public right-of-way, an encroachment permit would be required. Additionally, we're going to be doing an analysis based on how many employees you have or the size of the operation, square footage of your grow, to determine ADT, which is your average daily trips. And then there is a fee that is based on how many assumed average daily trips your operation will produce. And then that will have a fee that will be associated, one-time fee with your project, and will be added to one of the building permits that is required for your operation. So there's two different types of access that you may be required to use. A lot of our operations are allowed to use driveway access, which is a 10-foot roadway, but you may also be required to have an actual commercial roadway built as well. So driveways are access to up to 2 parcels. If you have an easement through one parcel to access yours, that can be a driveway. But anytime that you're accessing 3 or more residential parcels, you're actually moving into the roadway right-of-way area, which will require setbacks from that easement. So here it's showing a little example of what a driveway is. It's a 10-foot wide driving surface with 1-foot shoulders and then 10 feet of vegetative clearance on either side. That means that you need to have a minimum of a 32-foot easement is to be in if you're going through private property off of someone else's, but it's a 32-foot minimum area that's being improved for that driving surface. The other one is a roadway, which is 2 10-foot lanes, 2-foot shoulders, and then 10 feet of vegetative clearance on either side for a total of 50 feet. This is a much less common standard, but this is the fire safe roadway standard that may be required for your operation. And I'll pass it off to Scott, Nevada County Fire Marshal.
Good afternoon, everyone. Scott from the Fire Marshal's Office in Nevada County, and then as well as speaking on behalf of both Terry McMahon and Clayton Thomas from Nevada County Consolidated and Penn Valley Fire alike. So why are fire marshals involved? Our number one goal is life safety and giving the allowed zoning with commercial cannabis. All project sites within the county will fall within the SRA or the state responsibility area. The SRA defined by the Board of Forestry has a multitude of standards, including fire safe regulations, also known as Title 14, as well as Nevada County Ordinance 2474, which is the adoption of Title 14 in its entirety. And of course, other regulations that come from additional ordinances, as well as the California Fire Code. The 4 main focal points that we will be interested in looking at and seeing on your site plans is, of course, address signage, egress and access, water supply, and fuel modification standards. Starting off, don't want to beat this one to death. A simple address sign, however, it does need to have a certain amount of requirements. That is the 4-inch high numerals with half-inch stroke and to be placed or mounted on a weather, aluminum and or designed that will hold up in the weather and easily readable or easy to see it at nighttime. And this picture there on the right, kind of if you have a unique driveway or you have multiple residents off of one access point, being able to delineate where we need to go. And this is for not necessarily this project. This is for, you fall and get hurt or, any other issue that may result in either law, fire, or EMS arriving or getting out to your property. So it's really important to be able to get to where we need to go. So Lucas kind of hit on it earlier, but I'll go into it a little bit further, the difference between roads and driveways. Again, the dimensions Lucas already hit on. To add into Lucas's earlier statements, that 10% grade for roads is what the county currently has set forth as far as when it changes from being paved or gravel, to being paved at 10%. It needs to be able to support a vehicle that weighs 75,000 pounds, such as an example of this, our transport dozers here. And again, the driveway standards, skip through it quickly. The grades can be up to 16% gravel, and at 16.1 to 20% will be required to be paved, and anything above 20% generally is not allowed. However, there are unique cases in which through petitions of exceptions that can be possible. However, it's an additional hoop that will be required. And again, the surface weight rating capable of a 40,000 pound vehicle or a fire engine, and that's a minimum of 4-inch aggregate base. So now that we're venturing into a commercial fire related items such as access and turnarounds in a very rural setting, that we still have the turnouts and turnarounds which are required. As far as the turnouts, a widening of a roadway for allow a vehicle to pass. It's a 30-foot by 12-foot box with two 25-foot tapers on both sides. Driveways 150 feet to 800 feet will require one midpoint, and driveways 800 feet and over in length will require a turnout every 400 feet. Continuing on with the turnaround, it can either be a hammerhead or a terminus bulb. Here's an example of a hammerhead. It's kind of a 3-point turn for us for the fire guys. Or terminus bulb is a large, wide open round turn where we can make a complete turnaround without having to put it in reverse. Some dimensions there as shown as in the previous diagram on the right there. And for driveways that are 300 feet or more in length with a maximum grade of 12%, the hammerhead needs to be a maximum grade of 12% side to side and needs to be within 50 feet of the commercial structure. Water supply, this is required for any commercial building within the SRA available for emergency use if it's not already protected by municipal water supply and or fire hydrants out in the street. The most common and cost effective, of course, is the stored water, which is shown here in a lot of the pictures. They will all have a fire department connection or a hydrant or a fire valve. They're all the same. And the fire water will be standalone. It's not available for irrigation or for any other use. The quantity of water and the location of the tank and FDC will be determined and from your local fire marshal, depending on what jurisdiction you fall in. And it's all the calculations and formulas for the water storage comes out of NFPA 1142. Defensible space. Gosh, if these last few years haven't shown the importance of what good defensible space can help in terms of wildland fire coming through your neighborhood. We require this on every project, and that's to reduce the intensity of a wildfire by reducing the volume of vegetation, flammable vegetation around your residence. And this also goes for your greenhouses and or any other structures on your property as well. The intensity of the vegetation management may vary within the 100 feet perimeter, and the focal point being the first 50 feet around the structure. Again, Lucas hit on it earlier, the fuel reduction area. Jeff, there should be there it goes. The fuel reduction area along the driveway, it's not a clear cut, it's not a cut everything down, it's a fuel reduction. So we're getting rid of annual grasses, removing brush, and limbing up trees. This also includes a 15-foot vertical vegetation clearance, and that's measured from the outside edge of the shoulder of the roadway all the way along the driveway up to the either residence and or cultivation site commercial building. So we had some of our farmers that had a fire come very, very close to their project, and because of their defensible space, I'm sure some of their product may have been damaged. However, all the structures and all the product itself was virtually unscathed. A couple of other required items that are common on our commercial projects is the Knox Box. This allows us to get into your property. These boxes and or locks are keyed specific to the agency having jurisdiction, so we can get in there without causing damage to your gate. And then it went a little bit quick, but on the commercial buildings, the transmitting fire alarm system, compliant with NFPA 72, and that's for it. If there's any hazardous condition detected, it will notify dispatch and get an appropriate response on the road, regardless of anybody calling 911. And then lastly was the fire extinguishers, self-explanatory per fire code. And then in closure, we created a checklist for applicants, and it's a great tool for you to get started. It will discuss these and other fire safe regulations that we often see on our projects, and it's available through the Alliance and of course on mynevadacounty.com. And please look into that checklist when you're getting started. It's kind of designed for you right when you're getting started, before you're even really getting in too much contact with a design professional, for you to kind of do a self-analysis of your project and where you want and see the end result, and in relationship to now and what may need to be required to be addressed along the way, as far as, oh, this is rather steep right here, I might need to be looking at some additional grading and or a wider roadway due to a radius and things of that nature. So with that, I'll hand it off.
All right, so to wrap it all up, tips, tricks, lessons learned from staff. Start the process early. That's probably the one thing we want to drive home more than anything else. The reason we're doing this in September is really to, emphasize what's involved, what's required, the timing, so that you can start planning for next year. If you're planning on being a permitted commercial cultivator in 2022, you should really be taking notes, working on your application, contacting a design professional. All that should be happening right now, because your project may move really fast, and there may be something that you run into, and you just want to plan ahead to allow you time to get permitted before next April or May. Expect additional permitting requirements. Like I said, you never know what you're going to run into. Planning may require a management plan, which is going to require some additional work and costs on your end. There may be some other permit issues related to your parcel. Have realistic expectations for timeframes. We do have some people that have made it through in a pretty short amount of time, but that's not ideal. Usually it's maybe 2-3 submittals before somebody gets to that finish line. Expect more time than you think for licensed professionals. Right now, they're all pretty impacted. I think it's getting a little better than it was, probably 6 months ago, but they're still pretty far out. So like I said, you should be contacting professionals right now. And also don't feel like you have to stick with somebody local. If everybody local is, out a year, go down to Auburn, contact some people in Rockland. We get plenty of site plans from, design professionals that aren't located just in Nevada County. So just keep an open mind, be resourceful, be willing to go outside of the county if that's what you have to do. Another tip is to get a mentor. So the Alliance does have this buddy program that's been very successful for them. Really rely on the people that have paved the way, that have gone through the process early on during kind of those struggling years and learned a lot from that. That could cut down a considerable amount of time, from you having to struggle through and make the same mistakes. If confused, communicate. We're all here because we want to make sure that you know who to contact. If any questions come up, you can contact, directly. You can call planning or cannabis or building. You can send us emails. If you have any questions, just get a hold of us. So tips and tricks, lessons learned from customers. So commit and stay on top of permitting until finalization. So once you apply, you can expect comments back within 45 days. Set times for yourself, check back in on your application, look for those comments online, be on top of your project, because what happens a lot of times is people will apply, get some comments back, get frustrated, and then disappear. And those projects sit there forever until we check back in and try to get you back on track. Stick with it, push through, contact us if you have questions. We're here to help you get your project through to final. So however we can do that together, we're here for you. That kind of touches on the second thing. So get a baseline assessment from licensed professionals. Oftentimes, this is really goes for any commercial business. Try to look at all the factors long-term, not just what it's going to take for that initial submittal. Talk about, the project in its entirety. Make sure that they're really doing their due diligence when they look at your project, your operation plan, your parcel, etc. To continue on from customers, so be aware of consultants. There are a lot of consultants in Nevada County. There are good consultants, just like in the industry, and there are bad consultants. So make sure that you pick somebody who's at least gone through the process with somebody before. I know the Alliance can definitely give some referrals out for people that they work with. I'd highly recommend that. Pick somebody that knows what they're talking about. Don't get discouraged. Like I said, you may run into an issue along the way. Call us if you're getting discouraged, and we can try to help you out the best we can. Also, plan on additional fees. There may be fees coming from the fire district itself if you're in a different district than Scott's. There may be other consultant fees, impact fees based on your parcel. So with that, Dana or Maggie, I don't know if you wanted to say anything before we look at the questions or take questions.
Yeah, thanks so much to all of you. That was a wonderful presentation. And there's a few things I just want to reiterate before we jump into Q&A. One, I just want to remind everybody that this is all being recorded. The presentation itself will be available on the Cannabis Compliance Division's website on mynevadacounty.com. through there, as well as all of the recordings of this webinar and any of our previous Get Legit webinars are available through the Alliance website, and I'll post that link in the chat here as well. Two things I wanted to just point out to folks. I really want to emphasize what Jeff said about timelines. If you are working towards being permitted for 2022, now is the time to be working on this and doing things and making sure that you have ample time to get everything completed so that you are not rushed in this coming spring. The other thing I want to point out, Craig, thank you so much for your mention of it here in the chat, but I thought, Diana, this might be a great opportunity for you to just emphasize and reiterate what is expected regarding the local equity program that was just approved this past Tuesday here in the county.
Sure. I'm going to touch on two items to add to the tips and tricks, and then I will absolutely take the equity program item. I want to add to that list two things. The first one is, well, actually it's three things. The very first one is you must be your own general contractor of your application. We love our consultants and engineers and attorneys who are helping us. However, you must be in communication or copied into communications with the county, know all of the deadlines that are happening, because nobody is going to ensure that your project is moving forward and at the top of the game like you are. So please make sure to be the general contractor of your project. The second thing is that if this is your first Get Legit webinar and you have not or already seen our Get Legit webinar called Thinking of Getting Legit, Where to Start, watch that. We have recordings of it available and of licensed farmers and a local consultant, and it talks about costs, timelines, market conditions, all the questions that you want to ask yourself before you jump in the ring. And then the third thing I want to say related to timeline is that the plants in the ground policy will have expired, or actually it has already expired. And so what that means is that next year, to put your plants in the ground, you will have had to have had a approved local permit. The past couple years, people have been able to put their plants in the ground while they were still finalizing the last details of their permit. So that is going to affect people's timelines. You must get your projects submitted as soon as possible. We used to say get them submitted by the end of the year. Now we're saying by the end of October, latest by November, but you want to get them in really early. And yeah, Craig, thank you so much for making that comment in the chat. We have had a huge historic win in Nevada County this past Tuesday. The Board of Supervisors have adopted a local equity program, which staff has been working on, and that we have been very supportive of and advocating for close to 2 years now. And what it will do is it is a program that allows, that recognizes that Nevada County has had impacts due to the prohibition of cannabis. And what this program will do, it will provide to qualified applicants resources to both get legit and to for licensed operators who are already permitted. Resources could be in the support of fee and fee deferrals. It could be grants for improvements to the property, or assisting with items on your property that need to come into compliance. As well as business skills training. So thank you to staff and everybody who worked tirelessly to move this forward. And we are looking forward to the next steps of that process.
Thanks so much for that, Diana. We want to open it up now for Q&A. I want to encourage everybody who has tuned in this evening to use this opportunity to ask questions. You can type them into the chat and or to the Q&A function here. And I'll just go back and start with some of the ones that I know some of the county staff members have answered already. There was a question about the minimum separation between regular greenhouses. Scott replied to that saying that the minimum is 5 feet for greenhouses without solid sidewalls. There was, let's see here. So folks, I want to encourage you to use this opportunity to ask questions. I have a couple that I received here. One is about timelines, and I know Diana just mentioned the plants in the ground policy. There are a lot of people who have, anyway, Craig, or Jeff, I would love somebody maybe to speak to the transition plan, if that, and just explain to folks who are just now thinking of applying what the difference between now and prior to might have been with that. And I will lead into that by saying that I have received a lot of questions regarding timelines in terms of people getting a lot of very delayed timeline expectations, say if they are trying to get a residence put in place or something, and they're being told there's probably a 2-year wait list at this time, and sort of some of those more standard construction delays and supply chain issues that have been taking place since the pandemic. And if any of you could speak to that.
So I can speak a little bit to probably both of those. And if I don't answer your question, please re-ask it, Maggie. But so the transition period is something that's an allowance in the cannabis ordinance that is not an allowance for any other land use. So it is something that people should take advantage of, and many have. Basically what it is, if you have violations on your property that are land use violations that aren't an imminent threat or hazard, or associated to your cannabis cultivation permit, you can have up to 2 years essentially to transition them into actually approved permits and finalized projects and things like that. So for example, if you have a barn that you're using for residential purposes, or you have a accessory dwelling unit that was unpermitted and is as-built, you'll be given extra time while you can cultivate and have your commercial cannabis permit to bring those into compliance. The one important part about that is you have to apply for a commercial cannabis permit prior to May 14th, 2022. So if you apply after that, that code section sunsets from the ordinance and it won't be allowed anymore. So you apply on May 15th, 2022, everything on your property will have to be in compliance. So it's just something to take advantage of this next year because it's kind of the last hurrah of this section in the ordinance. The other part of it is material cost or material timeframes and how long it takes to order manufactured homes and things like that. Some of that is exaggerated a little bit, but it is also real. We've heard that consistently. Some of it's related to COVID and supply of materials and things like that, but a lot of it's just demand and available design and professionals and contractors. So some architects are out several years, same thing with engineers. Some contractors are out a couple of years for building homes. So the sooner the better. Obviously our local professionals are very good at what they do. They work with us all the time. So it is ideal that you use a local professional, but don't feel like you're handcuffed into, you know, waiting 2 or 3 years to be able to come into compliance. You can't cultivate during the period. So look outside. There's lots of professionals in the state and a lot of in the kind of Sacramento Valley region. So there is other resources if you have to go that route.
Great, thank you for that. All right, I'm gonna go jump around here a little bit. There was a question about greenhouses and the minimum separation between them and we saw that 5 feet was for greenhouses without solid side walls. Then there was a question about what about greenhouses with solid side walls? So it looks like Scott answered, greenhouses with solid walls are treated the same as any commercial building, regardless of type of construction. Thus, buildings less than 50 feet separation become exposures and will be susceptible to additional requirements. I'm not sure if that's comprehensible. If anybody wants to chime in or add anything to that in terms of the space in between, minimum separation between greenhouses.
Yes, Maggie, I'll chime in real quick. So when the greenhouses have these solid sidewalls, so basically it's got and a lot of these greenhouses, we do allow a solid end wall, and then a tarp and or visqueen side cover. It's permeable. Most of them you can lift up and or rip through, and thus it's still a structure. You're underneath the cover. However, due to the fact that you can basically exit in any direction without, being confined to a wall, thus ag exempt. So when we have the polycarbonate shells, a non-permeable wall, you can't walk through it, run through it, or lift it up, then it's treated as a commercial building. For NFPA 1142 calculations, and that's what we use to determine the amount of gallonages required for stored water on your site. When we get into, there's another factor of the equation towards the end down there at the bottom, and that's exposures. And when you have exposures less than 50 feet, your gallonage requirement goes up quite a bit by a percentage factor. So things to keep in mind. I know a lot of folks just due to the property and where they're setting up their cultivation area, they may be limited to the available square footage. So sometimes those greenhouses may be close together. Clayton, you want to chime in?
Yeah, just to add a little bit about the exiting out of the greenhouses. What I have experienced in some cases is properties where they put up solid end walls, but then they also create maybe 3 to 4 foot tall wooden sides down the long axis of the building. At which point you can no longer just run through the visqueen on the side and get out. So at that point, you're going to want to be careful about your travel distances from one end to the other and the proper doors to get out of those solid end walls, or you'll run into the same kind of exiting problems that any solid walled structure would have.
Great, thank you guys for that. We have a question here Craig, maybe this is your wheelhouse. It says, if I am a qualified biologist already on the county's list under my company, can I help people with biological reports outside of my company if I have some extra time?
I was actually going to toss that over to Mr. Cannell to answer that one if you can.
Oh, perfect.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question real quick?
Yes, it was, if I am a qualified biologist on the county's list under my company, can I also help people with bio reports outside of my company?
Yes, as long as you're considered a qualified biologist, that means that we've assessed your resume to make sure that you meet the minimum qualifications for biological analysis. So if you are on that list, whether you're with a company or not, you're able to do bio reports for the county.
Yes, I'll just state this in response. There was a question about the Williamson Act, just as an overarching thing for everybody to understand about cannabis. It is not regulated as a commercial agricultural crop. It is regulated as a commercial project and not ag. And so there are a tremendous amount of differences that stems from state regulations and trickles down from there. There is a lot of advocacy going on the state level to get that altered, but that is just where it stands at the moment. And so what is common in traditional agriculture is not necessarily applicable to cannabis projects at the moment. Are there more questions, folks? I'm sure there are. If you are still with us, please feel free to utilize this time and ask any questions that you have. I'm going to try to get something into the chat here for everybody. I received another question. This one was actually from the perspective of landlords. The question was about prior scenarios in which prior renters had incurred code violations, and whether those prior code violations will impact the ability to in the future to go into the permitting program.
So they may, but really that's what that transition period is for, is to, come forward and correct those violations ahead of time. And we allow you that time period to do that simultaneously while you're going through the process. Without knowing like what kind of violations there, it's hard to say. If they're just, solid waste or, inoperable vehicles or something like that, maybe an unpermitted, small structure, those are fairly easy to correct. If it's grading or anything significant like that, that may affect, the application and kind of how you proceed. So it's hard to say, but I'd say just reach out to us. We'd be happy to look at what you have and give you some advice.
Great. Great. Clayton, go ahead.
Just one thing to keep in mind, I'm guessing that most people, if we're talking about the permitting process that are on the attending this evening, are growers looking at next season. But just to give you an idea, and kind of tagging on to what Diana said earlier, scheduling things first, if you have questions or a concern about your site that you would like me to evaluate, and I know my colleagues on the call here also run into the same problem, get those handled early in the process or early in the year. We have kind of two shoulder periods where things are really busy in our shop, and that's winter, spring. We get kind of a lull in new applications as we get later in the year, and then it becomes the inspection crush, which is what we're in right now. And so during some of those time periods, I know I'm not able to make site visits to give like pre-application advice or evaluate something ahead of a step in the process, only because there's too many other projects going at the same time. And also, this industry, as a permitted industry in our county, is relatively new, but all of the workload that existed before is still there in the fire marshal world. So I would just encourage any prospective grower, if you're not sure about something and you're in the Penn Valley Fire District, please use my contact information at the top of the chat. the sooner you contact me, the more likely I'm going to be able to help you.
And I'm gonna make a comment after Clayton, which is, so we have a document that we created here at the Alliance. It's called the Assessing Land document, and it is meant for people who are looking to transition their property to get legit, and they want to see if their property would qualify or if people are looking for property. And it's a document that contains all of the setbacks, all of the various requirements, the allowances on each acreage and parcel. And so we are trying to attach that document to the chat. And while we try to figure that out, if we're not able to attach it to the chat, we will absolutely have it available on our website shortly. And we will also mail it or have it in our next newsletter. And the county now has a copy of it as of just a couple minutes ago. So you can also get this document through the county, but bear with us as we get it posted on all the sites and get that out to everybody. But it's going to be a really concise document that has all the information, and we're really grateful for county staff for reviewing that document for accuracy and helping us get it out. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that, Diana. That document will be available on the Get Legit part of our website, probably by the end of next week. So thanks everybody for your patience with that. Some of the other questions here. So this one came in, considering the state of affairs with price reductions for sales within the cannabis industry, are there any discussions or actions being taken to lower fees for entry? Understanding that some of these fees come from the state, is the county taking any steps?
So I can maybe take a stab and Jeff jump in if I miss anything, but generally speaking, the Nevada County local fees are the lowest fees in the state for actual cannabis permits, but the main costs are all your site costs, development, design, and everything else that comes with it. It's not necessarily just the county fees in and of themselves. So something in what Diana talked about is the equity program is definitely can be a good resource, because that will have a kind of myriad of resources. So funding, grants, loans, business assistance, fee waivers, things like that. It's kind of all over the map where we can have resources. The other thing to think about is there's after effects for everything equity. So not just locally, but if you look at, I think it's Senate Bill 166 that's going through legislation right now, actively talks about equity applicants having possible fee waivers at the state level and other benefits associated to equity. So, I mean, the fees at the state are definitely more than ours from a application and permit approval process. So it's something to think about, not just here locally, but the benefits that trickle down all the way to your state licensing. So Jeff or Dana, I don't know if you have anything else to add on that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention is the equity program. Now that that's essentially green lit, that's really part of that discussion. I know the state is in discussion with some other jurisdictions about that very issue. So yes, it is definitely being discussed. The last thing I'll mention too is our fees are fee for service. So essentially what you're paying for is that hour for planning to look at your site plan, or that hour for cannabis. We don't charge anything above just that time that we spend reviewing your project. So it's a little tough for the local fees, but we're hopeful with the grants that are coming out and the equity grant that we can hopefully find the solution to ease some of that hardship.
Thanks so much for that. And just following up on that, there's a question here that asks where the equity grant applications are located.
So the program is in development because it just got approved by the Board of Supervisors. So the assessment and the programmatic brochure documents last Tuesday. So essentially what our process will look like is developing program logistics, working with stakeholders, applying for grant funding, which will be around the end of this year. So we hope to have a program that's stood up with an application process by spring, summertime of 2022.
Great. Very exciting. If more folks have questions, please feel free to type them into either the chat or the Q&A. No questions are too silly, and we would love to answer them when we have you here to discuss it with. Otherwise, we will give everybody their evenings back if there are no other questions. I do want to reiterate a few things for folks. One is that we have a permitting support group this Monday at 3 o'clock. Continuing these types of Q&As, bring your questions there. All questions are acceptable. If you are in the process, get the support that you need, and these support groups are tremendously functional. It is a really great opportunity to connect with county staff, permitted farmers, Alliance staff members. It is just, if you have questions, these are truly the times to bring them to everybody. Here's a question. Can you mine and grow on the same property zoned for mining and agriculture?
I can answer that one. Yeah, you could technically grow on the same property as a mining operation. Just realize that a mining operation will require a use permit. And so that's a higher level discretionary permit that has to go to a public hearing. And then you would also want to have a separation of the land uses to make sure that there's no conflicting issues such as contamination of the cannabis from any of the materials used in mining. But they're not considered necessarily compatible land uses, but they can occur on the same property.
Great, thank you for that. I also wanted to just reiterate, our next Get Legit webinar is all about this state license application, taking you step by step from there, goes over state inspections. This is with the Department of Cannabis Control, which is the newly consolidated state regulatory agency. So that is also a very phenomenal opportunity to get time to ask questions directly to the Department of Cannabis Control. And then this winter, starting in January through March and April, we have more Get Legit webinars coming up in the same format. They will be on business development skills. We have a number of sessions with the county ag department who deals with weights and measures, folks scales, as well as pesticide regulations and reporting requirements on those. For those who have been in the permitting program already, we have a number of sessions about renewals and making sure that you are staying compliant and how to continue to run your business efficiently and effectively. And we also have a very important webinar on local and state cannabis taxes, which are different than other industries. And so really important to tune into all of these and stay educated and make sure you're asking the questions that you have, folks, and getting answers and getting the support you needed. There are a plethora of opportunities through the Get Legit education series for that. So please take advantage of them. If anybody else has questions, please take the opportunity now. Otherwise, if anybody, any of our wonderful presenters have any final comments or things they'd like to add for the evening, now would be a great time for that too.
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing. I think it was mentioned briefly in the slides, but we do have a planner consultation process that you can go through. So if you have a lot of questions on a project and it's very specific, I would highly recommend reaching out to planning for that, because you can essentially get kind of a pre-review, advice on how to move forward, and that will save you a lot of time, a lot of money, kind of learning what you need to do before you get that submittal. It's much easier to submit something that you're confident in and know that everybody's going to know what to expect, versus that's the first time we've ever seen it and it's a complicated project and maybe it's not correct. So reach out to planning if you want to do that. You just pay for the time, so it's not super expensive, but it's a good thing that planning allows for.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Well, with that, I just want to say a huge thank you to the county and all of the county staff members for joining us today. It was really above and beyond, and we really appreciate the partnership. I also want to just give another shout out to Nevada County Media for helping us make all of these webinars recorded and available to everybody through our very own YouTube playlist, which I linked in the chat earlier, and so please check those out. Reference this for your as much as you need for your project, and reach out to us here at the Alliance. Reach out to the county. There is support for you, no matter what stage of the process you're in. And we hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the evening. Please join us for our permitting support group on Monday, and we hope to see you at the next webinar with the DCC next month. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful night.